My name is Marina, and I thought I had finally gotten Christmas right this year. After 3 years of marriage to David, I'd learnt exactly how his family liked their holiday traditions. The dining room table gleamed under the chandelier, set with my grandmother's china that I'd carefully transported from storage. The turkey was golden brown, the cranberry sauce homemade, and even the centerpiece was arranged with the red and gold theme his mother, Patricia, had mentioned she preferred. I smoothed down my emerald green dress one last time before opening the front door. David's family lived just 20 minutes away in suburban Denver, but they always arrived like they were visiting from another country, with enough luggage and opinions to last a week. "Marina, darling," Patricia swept in first, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the December snow. She air-kissed both my cheeks before stepping back to examine my appearance. "How lovely! That color is so bold on you." I'd learnt to translate Patricia speak over the years. Bold meant she didn't approve, but couldn't find anything technically wrong with it. "Thank you, Patricia. You look wonderful as always." And she did. Her cream-colored wool dress probably cost more than my monthly salary at the marketing firm where I worked. David appeared beside me, wrapping his arm around my waist. "Mum, doesn't Marina look beautiful?" "She's been cooking all day, I'm sure she has." Patricia's smile was practiced. "Where should I put my purse, dear?" Behind her, David's father, Robert, carried in a bottle of wine and a covered dish. "Something smells incredible in here, Marina. You've outdone yourself." At least Robert had always been kind to me. He worked as an engineer and had the practical, straightforward personality that I appreciated. Patricia, on the other hand, had spent most of her marriage as what she called a homemaker, though from what I could tell, that mostly involved organizing charity luncheons and critiquing other people's life choices. "I made your favorite sweet potato casserole," I told Robert, taking the dish from his hands. "With the pecan topping," you remembered. His genuine smile warmed me more than I expected. David's sister Emma arrived next with her husband Kyle and their 2 young children, Sophie and Jake. The kids immediately filled our usually quiet house with laughter and energy, racing through the living room while Emma tried to corral them. "Sorry we're late," Emma said, hugging me tightly. Sophie had a meltdown over wearing the dress Mum bought her. I glanced at Patricia, who was already pursing her lips. The dress was perfectly appropriate for Christmas dinner. "She's 6, Mum," Emma replied tiredly. She wanted to wear her superhero costume. "Children need to learn proper behavior for special occasions," Patricia said, settling herself on our couch like she owned it. This was already starting exactly like every family gathering, Patricia making passive-aggressive comments while everyone else tried to keep the peace. I caught David's eye and saw him give me that apologetic look he'd mastered over the years. "Can I get everyone something to drink?" I asked, desperate to keep things moving smoothly. "Wine would be lovely," Patricia said. "Something dry. I brought a bottle if you don't have anything suitable." I bit back my first response. We had a perfectly good wine collection, but Patricia always brought her own anyway, just to make a point. The next hour passed in the familiar dance of family dinner preparation. I moved between the kitchen and dining room, making sure everything was perfect while Patricia offered helpful suggestions about my cooking techniques and David tried to mediate. Emma helped where she could between chasing her children, and Robert carved the turkey with military precision. Finally, we all gathered around the table. The food looked magazine perfect. The candles cast a warm glow, and for just a moment, I allowed myself to feel proud of what I'd accomplished. David stood to make a toast. "I want to thank Marina for this incredible meal and for making our house feel like home for everyone." Here, Robert agreed, raising his glass. Patricia lifted her wine glass with a thin smile. "Yes, Marina certainly tries very hard." The word tries hung in the air like a storm cloud, but I forced myself to smile and take a sip of wine. This was going to be a long evening. The first course went smoothly enough. Patricia complimented the soup, a butternut squash bisque I'd spent 2 hours perfecting, with the kind of faint praise that made me wonder if she was being sincere or just polite. Robert asked me about work, and I found myself relaxing as I told him about the new campaign I was developing for a local outdoor gear company. "Marina's really making a name for herself at the agency," David said proudly, squeezing my hand. "They're considering her for a promotion to senior account manager." "How nice," Patricia said, cutting her turkey with surgical precision. Of course, career advancement can be so demanding. I always wondered how working mothers manage to balance everything properly. I felt my fork pause halfway to my mouth. "We don't have children yet, Patricia." "Yet," she repeated, as if tasting the word. You've been married 3 years now. When Robert and I were your age, we already had David and Emma was on the way. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Mum, people have kids when they're ready. There's no timeline. I'm just saying that waiting too long can make things complicated. Biologically speaking. Patricia's voice carried that tone she used when she wanted to sound like she was just sharing helpful information rather than criticism. David cleared his throat. Mum, Marina and I will have kids when we decide we're ready. Her career is important right now. Important to whom? Patricia asked innocently. The question hit me like a slap. I set down my fork carefully, trying to maintain my composure. Important to both of us. David supports my career completely. Of course he does. David's always been supportive. Patricia's smile was razor sharp. Perhaps too supportive sometimes. A man needs a wife who puts family first. Not someone who's always at the office until 8 or 9 at night. Marina doesn't work late that often, David said, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. Doesn't she? Last month when I called on Thursday evening, she wasn't home until almost 10. And the week before that, she missed our family dinner because of some work emergency. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. The work emergency had been a genuine crisis. Our biggest client had threatened to pull their account, and I'd spent the evening in damage control mode. I'd saved the account and earned praise from my boss, but apparently Patricia had only seen it as me failing in my wifely duties. That was an exceptional situation, I said quietly. There always seems to be an exceptional situation, Patricia replied. Emma never had these conflicts when her children were young. She understood that family comes first. Emma looked mortified. Mum, please don't bring me into this. I'm just pointing out that there are different approaches to marriage, Patricia continued, warming to her theme. Some women understand that supporting their husband's success and creating a stable home environment is its own kind of career. Marina does create a stable home, David said, though his voice lacked conviction. Look at this dinner. Look at how beautiful our house is. Oh, I'm not criticizing Marina's housekeeping, Patricia said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure she does her best with the time she has available. Though I did notice the baseboards in the guest bathroom could use attention. My hands clenched in my lap. I'd spent the entire previous weekend cleaning this house from top to bottom, including scrubbing those damn baseboards. But apparently, I'd missed a spot, and Patricia had made sure to inspect and find it. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. The meal is delicious, Marina. You've really outdone yourself. Thank you, Robert. I managed a smile for him, grateful for his attempt to redirect the conversation. You know, Patricia said, leaning back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who'd been building up to a particular moment. I ran into Carol Henderson at the grocery store yesterday. Do you remember Carol, David? She used to live next door when you were in high school. David nodded warily. Vaguely. Well, she's divorced now. Has been for about 6 months. And she looks wonderful. She's been taking care of herself, joined a gym, really focused on her appearance and health. Patricia paused dramatically. She asked about you, actually. Seemed quite interested to hear you were doing well. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Emma stared at her mother in horror. Robert looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. David's face had gone pale. Mum, David said carefully, what are you trying to say? Patricia's smile was innocent as a snake's. I'm just making conversation, darling. Carol mentioned she'd love to catch up with you sometime. Maybe grab coffee and talk about old times. The silence stretched across the table like a taut wire ready to snap. Sophie and Jake, Patricia's grandchildren, continued eating their mashed potatoes, blissfully unaware that their grandmother had just lobbed a grenade into the middle of Christmas dinner. Patricia, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, are you suggesting that my husband should meet another woman for coffee? Don't be so dramatic, Marina. I'm simply mentioning that an old friend asked about him. There's nothing wrong with maintaining friendships. She took a delicate sip of her wine. Although I suppose if someone felt insecure about their marriage, they might interpret it differently. David finally found his voice. Mum, that's completely inappropriate. I'm married to Marina. I'm not interested in meeting Carol or anyone else. Of course you're not interested now, Patricia said with a patronizing smile. But marriage has changed, David. People grow apart. Sometimes a man realizes he needs something different from what he thought he wanted. When he was younger, I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest. Something different like what, exactly? Patricia's eyes met mine directly for the first time all evening. Like a woman who understands that a successful man needs a partner who complements his ambitions rather than competing with them. Someone who can host proper dinner parties for his colleagues. Someone who's available when he needs support. Someone who makes him feel like the priority in his own home. Marina does all of that, Emma said sharply. She's sitting at a table she's set with food she cooked, hosting all of us in her home. After working a full day at her office job, Patricia added pointedly, "Tell me, Marina, when was the last time you surprised David by being home early with his favorite meal ready? When did you last suggest he invite his work friends over for an evening? When did you last ask him about his day without immediately launching into complaints about your own?" Each question hit like a physical blow because underneath the cruelty, there was a grain of truth that made it worse. I had been working long hours lately. I had been stressed and probably not as attentive as I could have been. But I was building a career, contributing to our household income, and trying to be a good wife at the same time. "I think that's enough," Robert said firmly. "Patricia, this is an appropriate dinner conversation. I'm just being honest about what I observe," Patricia replied. "David looks tired. Looks like a man who's carrying too much responsibility. And then I see a woman like Carol Henderson, who's learnt from her mistakes, who understands what really matters in a relationship. And I think—" "You think what?" I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You think David should give another woman a chance? Is that what you're saying, Patricia?" The table fell completely silent. Even the children stopped eating, sensing the tension in the room. Patricia set down her wineglass slowly, deliberately. She looked at me with cold calculation, and when she spoke, her voice was crystal clear. "Yes, Marina. I think David should give another woman a chance. I think he deserves to be with someone who puts him first, who appreciates what a good man he is, who doesn't make him feel like he's competing with a job for his wife's attention. I think he married too young and settled for someone who doesn't really understand what it means to be a wife." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Emma gasped audibly. Robert looked stricken. David sat frozen, his mouth slightly open as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. But I felt something strange happening inside me. The hurt and shock were still there, but they were being overtaken by something else. Something harder and cleaner and more powerful. Clarity. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my plate. When I spoke, my voice was quiet but steady. "Patricia, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You just told my husband, in my home, at the Christmas dinner I prepared, that he should find another woman. You've spent the entire evening criticizing everything from my cooking to my career to my worth as a wife. You've disrespected me, my marriage, and this family." I looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. "I have tried for 3 years to earn your approval, Patricia. I've bitten my tongue through countless comments about my job, my appearance, my housekeeping, and my choices. I've smiled through your backhanded compliments and swallowed your criticisms, because I wanted peace in this family." David started to speak, but I held up my hand. "But you've just crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. So here's what's going to happen." I checked my watch. It's currently 7:43 p.m. I'm giving you exactly 15 minutes to gather your things and leave my house. If you're not gone by 8 o'clock, I'll help you to the door myself. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's face went through a series of expressions: shock, indignation, and finally, cold fury. "Excuse me. You're throwing me out of my son's house on Christmas. This is our house, Patricia. Mine and David's. And yes, I'm asking you to leave." I remained standing, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. David finally snapped out of his stunned silence. "Marina, maybe we should—" "No." I turned to face my husband directly. "David, your mother just told you to your face that you should leave me for another woman. She did it in our home during the holiday dinner I spent days preparing. If you think there's any maybe about this situation, then we have bigger problems than I thought." Robert stood up abruptly. "Patricia, we're leaving. Now. I will not be spoken to this way by—" Patricia began, her voice rising. "By what?" I interrupted. "By your son's wife? By the woman whose home you're sitting in? By someone who's spent 3 years trying to be good enough for a family that clearly never intended to accept her anyway?" Emma had gathered her children and was whispering to Kyle. Sophie tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, why is everyone angry?" "We're not angry, sweetheart," Emma said softly, shooting her mother a look of pure disappointment. "Grandma and Grandpa are just leaving a little early." "But we haven't had dessert yet," Jake protested. "We'll have dessert at home," Kyle said firmly, already helping his wife collect their coats. Patricia remained seated, her face flushed with anger. David, are you going to let her talk to your mother this way? All eyes turned to my husband. For a moment that felt like an eternity. He sat there looking torn between the woman who raised him and the woman he'd married. I could see the conflict playing out across his features, years of conditioning warring with what he knew was right. Finally, David stood up and walked around the table to stand beside me. Mum, what you said tonight was unforgivable. Marina has been nothing but respectful to you, and you attacked her in our own home. She's right to ask you to leave. Patricia's mouth fell open. David, I was only trying to help you see. See what? That my wife isn't good enough. That I made a mistake marrying someone I love because she has a career and ambitions of her own. David's voice was getting stronger. Marina makes me proud every single day. She's brilliant at her job. She takes incredible care of our home. And she's been more patient with your criticism than any person should have to be. I never criticized, Patricia started. You've criticized everything from how she loads the dishwasher to whether she's worthy of being my wife, David said flatly. And tonight you crossed a line I didn't even know existed. Robert had Patricia's coat in his hands. Patricia, we're going now. I checked my watch again. 12 minutes, Patricia. She finally stood, her movements sharp with anger. You'll regret this, Marina. When David realizes what kind of woman you really are, the kind who throws elderly parents out into the cold on Christmas, you'll remember this conversation. The only thing I'll remember, I replied calmly, is that I finally found my backbone. Emma hugged me tightly before leaving. I'm proud of you, she whispered in my ear. Someone needed to stand up to her years ago. Robert paused at the door. Marina, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of that. Thank you, Robert. You're welcome here anytime. Patricia swept past me without another word, her chin held high in defiant dignity, but I caught the flash of uncertainty in her eyes, the look of someone who'd played a game and suddenly realized they'd lost. After the door closed behind them, David and I stood in our suddenly quiet house, surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be a perfect Christmas dinner. I should have said something sooner, David said quietly. I should have defended you better over the years. I turned to face him. You defended me when it mattered most. That's what counts. Are we going to be okay? He asked, and I could hear the genuine worry in his voice. I looked around our home, at the table I'd set with such care, at the meal that had been prepared with love, at the life we'd built together despite his mother's disapproval. We're going to be better than okay, I said. We're going to be honest with each other, and we're going to have boundaries that people respect, even family. David pulled me into his arms. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Sullivan. Merry Christmas, Mr. Sullivan. As we started clearing the table together, I realized something important. I hadn't just given Patricia 15 minutes to leave my house. I'd given myself permission to stop apologizing for taking up space in my own life. And that was the best Christmas gift I could have asked for.